Now, all right, guys, welcome back again to the channel. Now, we stopped at, creating a role. All right, so this is the second part of the video. And now the next thing we want to do now is to set up our instances. Okay, so I'm going to go over to my instance page right here. And of course, I'm going to refresh. And I'm going to create two instances, one for the Jenkins and then one for our web server, right? Now, I'm going to click on Launch Instance, and I'm going to call these Jenkins master node, all right? And so it's going to be Ubuntu. And right here, it's going to be, all right, the latest one here. Okay, for the purpose of the instance, let's do T3 small. All right, and then we'll come here to keeper. We're not using a keeper, all right? That's why we're using SSM. So click on edit, and right here I'm going to select my VPC. So it's going to be in a private subnet anyways. And then we already have our security group created. So select existing, and then the instance is going to be the Jenkins security group. So select that. For the storage space, I can increase this to 20 to 10, whatever. And then I scroll down. Now under advanced details, I need to attach the role, right? So here I'm going to select the role that we just created, and that role is this one, Jenkins instance role. So select that. And if you scroll down all the way down, you have this user data section, because what we want to do is we want to bootstrap Jenkins installation from the scratch, right? We don't want to, start going through the manual process. And so I have a script that I've put together for us here, which is this one. So this will help us to bootstrap Jenkins instance, all right away. So I'm going to come here, copy all of this, all right, and then I'm going to come back here and select this, all right, and that's all we have to do. Okay, and then we'll come here and say launch instance. Now, as best practice, normally it is advised that you do not run your workload on your Jenkins master node. Okay, your Jenkins server should be a distributed kind of server, which means you have other nodes that you build your job on, right? Not directly on the Jenkins. So in fact, if you go through the Jenkins documentation, it tells you that it is not advisable, particularly in a production environment, that you should use maybe a Docker agent, or you have instances that you can attach to your Jenkins server that, what the Jenkins will primarily just do is to distribute the jobs, to these nodes, and then the job runs on the node, all right, itself. So let's create a node for Jenkins that we're going to attach to the Jenkins server, all right? So I'm going to call this Jenkins node. And of course, we're going to do the same Ubuntu. And of course, let's do another T3 small. Okay, sorry, Ubuntu I meant, not Mac. Okay, so let's select Ubuntu. All right. So, and then it's going to be of the T3 dot small. All right. And then we'll come here, no keeper as well. All right, so it did this. Private subnet also, it can be anyone. So let's select the second one here. All right, existing security group. This time around, it's still going to be the same Jenkins security group, right? And this one also, we can give it 20. Okay, and then of course, we go to advanced details, instance profile. We attach that same rule, all right, to it. And then of course, when we scroll down, what we're going to be installing here is going to be different, because we're doing something different, all right, on this one. Okay, so it's something different entirely. Okay, so let's take a look at something. So here under the Jenkins slave, I have these installation that will install. Okay, so let me just copy all of this. Okay, and then paste it here. On my channel already, I think I talked about how to add, Jenkins node to your Jenkins server and all that. So I will link up the video here so that you can watch, all right, that. So now I'm going to come right here. Now, the problem that we might have is the way Jenkins talks to its node. All right, that can be a challenge. Okay, so we may not be able to connect this node to the Jenkins server. I just remembered that right now, okay? Because when you want to connect this node to your Jenkins server, you might need an SSH key to do that, all right? So, but in our own case, in this scenario, we're not using any SSH key. So I do not think it is going to be necessary for us to have a node connected to the Jenkins server when we don't have an SSH key, because the only other way is to use what you call Jenkins can actually connect to its node via, I think, HTTPS or something, but then you still have to go through some other process in order for your Jenkins server to be able to do that. All right, so in order not to waste our time on this, really, I'm just going to cancel this particular option. All right, so we're not going to do that, okay? So let's just use the master node for what we want to do, and then we'll move on from there. Now, the Jenkins server is up and running, but then we're not sure if, all of the things have been installed, because it's in the private subnet. Of course, NAT gateway is opened up, but then if you remember, the security group of our Jenkins server, the outbound only allows 443, right? So that means if you come here to security group, the outbound is only allowing 443 out, all right, and then 443 in. Is that okay? So it's only allowing that. So, but of course, it doesn't have a public IP, so we can't access this instance except via a load balancer. So we need a load balancer to be able to access, all right, this instance. So we can come right here and come to load balancers. All right, and we're going to see how we're going to use this load balancer, because if you look at the image we have here, the load balancer is actually helping us to terminate the, SSL connection, all right, to the Jenkins server and to the, all right, SSM web server, right? And both of them are not in the same target group. They belong to different target groups, okay? But we're going to see how to use the load balancer to do that. So let's go to the load balancer. Let's create a single load balancer. And of course, we're going to have two different target groups, one for Jenkins and one for the web server, all right? So let's see that. The load balancer page is still loading. Now, while the load balancer page is loading, of course, I have two domains that I've registered. So there's one class25.online, and then I have another one, teachdev.online. So these are domains that are registered with just $1.20 something cent. Okay. So you can also get one for yourself so that you can basically, do all the things that we're going to be doing in this video. All right. So the load balancer page is up. So let's click on create a load balancer. And of course, we're going to be creating an ALB. So create. And right here, I'm going to just call these master. All right, master ALB. All right, so it's going to be internet facing. That's what user will access. All right, based on our diagram right here. All right, even the GitOps is going to go through the load balancer as well. So I'm going to come here. It's going to be IPv4, select a VPC. All right. And so you select the two availability zones, but make sure that you are selecting your public subnet, not your private subnet, right? Because remember, it is internet facing. Okay. So for security group, we already have one created for the load balancer. So we're just going to come here and select it. All right. And then for the traffic, so here it's going to be HTTPS traffic. All right, and the target group, we don't have anyone yet, so we're going to create a target group. This target group is going to be for the Jenkins server. All right, and then we're going to have another target group for the web server itself. So we're going to call this, all right, Jenkins SG or Jenkins TG rather, target group. And the protocol and the port is going to be HTTP. All right, for this guy. So HTTP. And the port, remember, the Jenkins port is 8080. Okay, is what? It is 8080. So that means your Jenkins server must be accessible on port 8080, not on port 443. So that means in our security group, there's a little adjustment that we need to do. All right, so go back to security group and then open up your Jenkins security group. Okay, and then we're going to say here that the inbound here, it's going to be on 8080, not just on HTTPS, right? So this is going to be custom TCP, all right, but then it's going to be what? 8080. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing for this one as well. So add a rule custom TCP 8080, and then this is going to be the security group of the load balancer. All right, so save the rule and then update that. All right, because your Jenkins server is actually accessible on port 8080 or not 443. Okay, All right, so go back here, and then this is for HTTP, but then it is what? 8080. All right. So the VPC is the same. Health check is going with 8080, but then you have to put /login because your Jenkins server is reachable on /login. I mean, it's a Java-based application. All right. So once you're done with that, you click on next, and then that's your node right there. Include, all right, spending. Of course, it's going to communicate via the private IP address anyway. So create a target group. And once the target group has been created, of course, you go back to your load balancer, you refresh this page, and then you select your target group. Now you scroll down, of course, you have to select your certificate. So for the Jenkins server, we're going to be using this certificate. All right, for the Jenkins server, which we already created on the Certificate Manager. And again, if you go through my videos, I already talked about how to create a certificate on AWS with the Certificate Manager. All right, and then after that is done, we can scroll all the way down and then say create load balancer. All right, so the load balancer is going to be created. All right, and then of course, if you go back to the target group, we can already see that the target is being registered at the spot. All right, now if we want to access, the instance, how do we go about it? So we can come here to the EC2 instance, click on connect. Of course, SSH is not going to work, but let's look at Session Manager. So your Session Manager, based on that key security IAM policy that you attach, the instance managed core, is going to allow you to connect. So you can see here that automatically we can connect, right? So click on connect, and then let's see, all right, what we are going to have. So this should establish a connection with your Session Manager. All right, so let's take a look and see what that will give to us. And of course, if you go to the Session Manager page, all right, you can also visualize it and see that it has actually started a session. Now you can see here that a session has actually started. All right, so if I come here now and I do sudo system CTL status, all right, Jenkins. So let's see if the Jenkins server was installed. All right, so now we have a little challenge. So it tells us here that system CTL status, I mean, it can recognize any Jenkins server. So why is that? All right, why do we have that particular problem? So if you come here now and let's say we just want to do sudo apt update, okay, we can see that there's a problem actually. Now remember, we are allowing outbound to HTTPS, not HTTP. So here it is trying to connect on HTTPS, okay, but then it is not working. All right, it's not working. So what could be the problem with these setup? I mean, we're able to connect to the Jenkins server, but then we're trying to run sudo apt update. It's trying to use HTTPS, but HTTPS seems not to be working. Because if you look at all of these ones, these are HTTP, and then it tells us here, it basically returns an error. All right, so you can see all the errors that we have right here. So how do we solve this particular problem? What do we do? How do we solve it? Now, another thing also that I need to mention is that when you're using the Session Manager on the console, there's actually a problem. So if you come here now and then you try to delete, all right, it's going to work. All right, but then let's say you try to recall a command. Look at that. I'm trying to use my up arrow to recall a command, and then it gives me all these, unnecessary characters on my screen. Now, what can I do? Now, SSM is something that you can also access locally, all right, from your system directly instead of doing through the console. But the condition is that you must have the SSM plugin installed on your system. So if you look at this documentation, it says install the Session Manager plugin for AWS CLI. So that means this plugin must be installed before it can be used. And then of course, you can install it for Windows, for Mac, for Linux, and all of that. So if you click on Windows, as I am using Windows, all right, it tells you how you can, all right, install it. So this is the way you can install it. But the good news also is that you can also install it through the Windows Package Manager, which is Chocolate. All right, so you can come here to Chocolate, and then come right here and then search for session, all right, manager. Okay, and then if you search for session manager, it tells you, it gives you this software, so you can come and do Choco install session manager, and then you install it. So once you're able to install this, then on your system you can access, all right, these plugin to connect to your instance. So we're going to do that actually. So right here, I'm going to clear my screen again, and of course you must have your CLI configured already before you can actually leverage this tool. And I already have my own CLI configured, so I'm going to just say export AWS underscore profile, because I have different profiles of my system. All right. Okay. And then I'm going to say that AWS configure. All right. List. So now I'm using the correct profile, but then this profile has a region that is EU West 1. So I want to change that region to another one, right? So what I'll do is I'm going to say AWS configure set region. And then the region I'm in at the moment is EU West 1. All right. And then I'm going to say the region should affect this particular profile. And the name of the profile is this. And then I'll press enter. All right. And then if I do the list again, you will see that the region name has changed. All right. So now I can use my SSM command to do all of this. So if I come right here, now I can start this with this command, right? AWS SSM start session. All right. The target ID, the document name is the start an interactive command. And of course, the parameter, the reason for this document name, all right, which is something you can get on the AWS CLI command reference, is so that, all of these things that I see on the console, right? I'm trying to use the up arrow command, and it's giving me all of these. I don't want that, right? I want a proper TTY session. Okay, so that's the reason for this. So copy that, paste that here, but of course you need to change your target ID. All right, so we have a new target, so I'm going to come right here. All right, and then I'm going to come here. So this is my target ID, so I can copy it from here as well. All right, and then drop it here and then press enter. So that's also going to start a session for us. So you can see that it starts in a session, and then now I am connected to my instance. SSH port not opened up. All right, no direct access to the internet, but with SSM, I'm able to access, all right, my instance. So now how do we correct that anomaly that we saw? It was trying to connect to HTTP, but it wasn't working and all of that. What do we do? How do we solve that problem? Now, the reason why you have that issue is actually because of your APT source list. By default, that source list is actually defining HTTP and not HTTPS. So we need to change it from HTTP to HTTPS in order for what we want to do to work. All right. If not, it's not going to work. All right. So what we can do is to say, if I say cat, I need to use sudo, and then I say cat/etc apt. All right. So if I do apt, and then I can say sources list, all right, .d, and then Ubuntu. So that's the full path. All right. And then you press enter. Now, if you look at what you have, you can see here where you have URIs. All right, this endpoint is what is HTTP. And this other endpoint is also what is also HTTP. So we need to change that to HTTPS, because we are only allowing HTTPS traffic outside of, all right, the security group. So what we can do is that I can recall that. Now look at that. I'm recalling now. It's not giving me all that, jargon. So now we have a proper terminal. So here I'm going to say nano. Okay, to edit that, and then I'm just going to scroll all the way down here. All right, and then the URI is what I'm interested in, so I'm going to change this one to HTTPS. So just add S in front, all right, of that, and then here S, and then you save, all right, and then you cancel out. All right. So now if I do sudo apt update, all right, that should work. You can see that it's working now, because the traffic we are allowing is HTTPS traffic and not HTTP. So now it's working. So that means my script can now run. But unfortunately, of course, we have to, copy that script and then run it right here. But of course, there's no issue with that. So all I need to do is just to say nano. I can just say jenkins.sh. All right. And of course, I need to do sudo with that, right? So let's just say sudo nano. All right, jenkins.sh. Okay. And then all I need to do is to copy what I have here. All right, copy everything, and then I drop it here. Okay, as simple as that, right? And then I will come here and say Control O to save, Control X to exit out. All right, and then I can say chmod plus X as usual. All right, Jenkins.sh. Okay, operations not permitted, so you need sudo to do most of the things here. All right, so we look at it now. Of course, it's the file is owned by root, so I can say sudo chmod plus X, right? And then Jenkins.sh. All right, so now it's executable. So now I can do like this, all right, and then execute a script, okay. But then I can also do bash, all right, and then say Jenkins.sh. So let's see which one works. So now bash Jenkins.sh is working, so the script is running. So let's see what we have. So this is going to automate the Jenkins installation process and everything for us automatically, so we don't have to break our head over this. Now, it is possible that the target group is in the unhealthy state because we do not have Jenkins installed yet. Now, it's, I mean, I told us, right, it's actually unhealthy because we don't have Jenkins installed yet. So, but ATT is not available just yet, all right? But after that we install Jenkins, then that port should be opened up. All right, after Jenkins has been installed, then we should have the port opened up and then available, and then the instance becomes healthy. All right, but until then, let's wait and let's wrap up these Jenkins installation. All right, so now we're going through SSM, no SSH keys, no port 22 opened up. The traffic is basically going over HTTPS, through the AWS network. Now, if you look at all the package lists, you can see that it's using HTTPS. No package here is using HTTP, right? Everything is using HTTPS, not HTTP. And that is exactly what we want to achieve. All right. So let's allow all of this to finish. I mean, it's just a default script that I have. So it's going to install other things that we don't need for this video, but that's okay. All right. So, but then it shouldn't take more than expected. So let's wait, let's hold on. So you can see everything is using HTTPS and not HTTP. And that's one thing I want you to take note of. All right. So let's see. And the reason why we're able to do all of this is because we already have a NAT gateway connected to the route table. So that NAT gateway is what is giving us the privilege to do all of these things that we're doing. All this installation is possible because we have a NAT gateway attached. All right, so let's take a look and let's wait for all of these things to finish, to wrap up. All right, so now, of course, after some time, this should be healthy. All right, it should return the healthy status once we have the Jenkins server up and running. All right, it should return as healthy, but of course, for now, it's still unhealthy. So now, if we do sudo systemctl status Jenkins, all right, now we see that we have the Jenkins server active, enabled, and it's running. And of course, the initial password is also right here, so I can grab that. All right. And now the next thing we need to do is Jenkins has been configured to accept traffic from the load balancer. All right. So that means we will have to access Jenkins from the load balancer endpoint. All right. But of course, what I want us to do is I want us to copy this. All right, this DNS name, copy that, come here to your domain, create a new record, and this is going to be a CNAME record. All right, and I'm just going to say this is Jenkins. All right, and then paste that right here. Okay, and then we can just say 1 hour and save that. So the implication of this is that I'm able to access my Jenkins server via a domain name, not via the public IP, because we don't even have a public IP here in the first instance, right? So that's going to be jenkins.class of25.online. That is what this is going to give to us. All right, so let's see that in action and let's see if that works. So let's press enter. And let's see if we're able to access Jenkins. Now, a Jenkins server, I mean, it's coming up. All right, so look at that. So we're accessing Jenkins server via a secure endpoint. The SSL is being terminated by the application load balancer. We're not accessing Jenkins through the public IP address again. All right, so and of course, if you come here right here, you will see that it says the connection is valid. And of course, it's coming from this certificate, and the certificate was issued by AWS. All right. Now, if I go back to the target group and let's refresh again and let's see what we have. All right. So now the target group is telling us that the Jenkins server is what? Is healthy, because now port 80 is opened up and Jenkins server is actually up and running. So now the target is what? It is healthy. So that's one down. So let's go ahead and install Jenkins. So of course, we need to get the initial password. So let's copy that initial password. And then we'll come here, paste the initial password, click on continue. Now, the beautiful thing about these, using a domain name like this is that you don't have to worry about changing your Jenkins, public IP every now and then. And additionally, it also makes your Jenkins server secure. All right, because now your Jenkins server is behind a load balancer. It does not have SSH port opened up. It does not have, port 8080 opened up to everybody. It is only accepting, traffic from the load balancer. All right, so it makes your Jenkins server secure, at least in a sense, right? And your Jenkins server can only be accessed via SSM. Okay, so there's just a lot of security right here. So let's click on install suggested plugin. Let's just go through the default process. Let's allow it to install this. Now, the next thing we want to do is, of course, we've figured out, some of these things here. The next thing we want to do now, we have the load balancer active. We have the target group also, active and all that. So let's go back to the instance and let's set up another instance for the web server. All right. Remember, from our drawing, we also have another instance for the web server itself. Okay, so let's go back to that and let's click on launch instance. All right, so we're just going to call these web server. It's going to be the same Ubuntu. All right, it's going to be the same Ubuntu machine that we are going to use. All right, so let's select Ubuntu from here. And of course, we can also do T3 micro. All right, we can do T3 micro. Keeper, of course, we don't need a keeper. Let's edit the security group. Select this. That's also going to be in a private submit. Existence security group. And we're going to select this one, instance SG. That's security group for it. We can give this maybe like 10 gig, right? It doesn't matter. And then we come here and we want to attach a role as well. And that role is this one, SM instance role. And now for this one, we need a user data. Now, the reason why we need user data for this is that we want to prevent, what happened earlier, where we didn't, the source list, right, that only allowed HTTP. So what we want to do here is that we want to change that using user data automatically so that we don't have to log in into the instance before we can change that, right? We don't want to do that. We don't want to do that right now. Okay, so now I have a script that I put together also that will help us to do that. So let me share what the script is doing with you. So here you have the bin bash as usual, and then here you have this sed command, so that what the sed command will do is that it will check this file. So every place that you have HTTP is going to change that to HTTPS. Okay, so that's what this sed command will do for us. So basically, search this particular file. Anywhere you find HTTP, change that to what? To HTTPS. Okay, so that's what we want to do. So we want to correct that once and for all. And of course, we want to make sure that we have the AWS CLI installed on this particular machine, because we're going to be running some AWS CLI command on this particular server. So we need to be to ensure that we have that already. So I'm going to copy this from here down to this point. That's all that we need. So copy that, and then we'll come here, we'll paste it here. All right, and then we'll say launch instance. So we have the role attached to it, and then of course we are also correcting that HTTPS issue. All right, so that whatever it is that we want to install can go through without us having to worry about anything. Let's check our Jenkins server. So Jenkins server, the initial setup is done. So the username, I'm just going to call this Jenkins for the purpose of what we're doing. I'm going to call this Jenkins as well. Jenkins. All right, Jenkins. Jenkins right at email.com. For the purpose of testing, and then I'm going to say save and continue. All right, so now the Jenkins server is accessible from this URL. So now I don't have to worry about changing the IP address of my Jenkins server every now and then, right? Because now I'm using a domain name. All right, so the IP address and all of that is managed behind the scene. All right, so I don't have to worry about that. So anytime I want to access my Jenkins server, I just go to jenkins.class of25.online, and then my Jenkins server is accessible. Okay. Now, if you don't want to use an ALB, maybe you're thinking, oh, ALB is too much, right? Even an ALB for Jenkins and all of that. Of course, you can also use Nginx, right, as a reverse proxy. Okay, and then you can also get a certificate to terminate your SSL connection with the Nginx reverse proxy. The only thing is that you will not be able to use AWS, certificate, because AWS certificate cannot be exported. All right, you can export AWS certificate, right? You can only just use it, for resources that are closely tied to, the AWS environment, okay? But if you want to use Nginx reverse proxy, that means you need to have another certificate provider. Maybe you get it from Let's Encrypt. That's an open source certificate authority. So you can get it from them, and then you use Nginx as your reverse proxy. You terminate your SSL with Nginx and all of that, and then your server becomes secure. So that way you can also do it. But our own case here, we're using the load balancer for two things. We're using it for the Jenkins server. We're also using it for the web server as well. So the load balancer is going to help us undo, the two target groups. All right, and then we're going to leverage the SNI, which is server name indication, to manage the certificate, for both of these target group. All right, so that's why we're going with application load balancer. So let's save and finish. And of course, Jenkins is up and running. And then of course, we can click on start using Jenkins. All right, isn't that interesting? Very interesting, guys. Okay, so it's giving us a warning here, and the warning is basically because it does not advise us to build on the Jenkins master node, right? It advises that we have nodes elsewhere connected to the Jenkins server, and Jenkins basically sends, jobs to this node, and then they handle all of the setup. But for the thing that we're doing, we can stick with these for now. But of course, best practice is that you have different nodes for different purposes connected to your Jenkins server, and then your job runs on those nodes. All right. So let's click on Manage Jenkins. Let's install two plugins that we need for what we want to do. So I'm going to click on plugins right here and go to available plugins, and I'm going to search for pipeline AWS. All right. So that's the first plugin we need. And then the second one is the pipeline stage view. We need that also. And then we also need pipeline utility steps. All right, pipeline utility steps. So those are the three plugins we need. So pipeline utility steps. All right, so these are the three plugins that we're installing: AWS steps, stage view, and utility step. The AWS steps will allow us to use the AWS workflow with the there's this statement in your configuration file where you have with AWS, you can specify the credentials, the region, the role, all those kind of things. And then the stage view will show us, the stages, all right, stage 1, stage 2, and all that. The utility step will allow us to use a tool called read JSON, which I'm going to show you in the pipeline configuration. All right. So let's click on install to install these plugins, and of course it's going to install other things for us. All right, and then if you can, from what you can see that the plugin is installing and everything is working as we expect. All right, so if you go back to instance, the second instance should be up and running at this point. All right, it should be up and running. So we can go back to our page here. We have the Jenkins own here. We can open up another terminal right here. And I'm going to call that one, let me rename that to EC2 instance. And then I'm going to rename this one to, let's call that Jenkins, right? So we have two of them. Okay, so this one is Jenkins and this one is for EC2. All right, so here I need to do AWS configure to be sure that my key is still very much. You can see that, the key is no longer there, so I need to set the profile again. So export AWS underscore profile equals my name. So that's the profile. All right, so let's check the list again, all right, so we have the correct region. So what I can do also is I can come here, or I can just copy this command right here, copy that, paste this here, and then of course I need to change the target ID, all right, to the correct one. So copy that, and then if you come right here, you can grab the instance ID from here, you can go back here, and then you can connect to your instance. So That's also going to start a session. And then right now we're connected to the instance. So we can verify that, the SED command actually changed that from HTTP to HTTPS. So let's verify that. So cat etc apt, all right, apt. So that should be sources list.d, and then you have Ubuntu sources. So let's verify that. Oops. Now look at that. That did not work. All right, because right here what we have is still HTTP. Okay, so that command did not work for whatever reason, right? So I don't know why it didn't work, but then let's do that again, right? So let's copy this again. We can troubleshoot that later on. Okay, so let's edit that. Maybe because we didn't put sudo before that command, right? Maybe we should have added sudo here. Okay, maybe that will have, sorted out the issue, maybe. All right, but then, like I said, so sudo sed. So let's do that again, and then let's check the file. All right, now it worked. So I think the problem we had why it didn't work initially was because we just wrote sed. So that command requires root privilege because you're editing something in the etc directory. So you can't edit something in the etc directory without having sudo privilege. So I think that's why it failed. And so if it failed, it definitely means that this AWS command might not work. So let's verify that. So AWS version. So let's see if that was installed. Okay, so now it wasn't installed, all right, because HTTPS is what is required, so we didn't have that. So let's just say sudo. So you can see some of the challenges that we have and then how we're resolving them. Okay, so I'm going to say aws.sh. All right, so I'm just going to copy this path. All right, so just copy that path, come here and then paste that inside here. All right, so Control O to save, Control X to exit out, and then of course sudo chmod plus x aws.sh, and then I can simply just say bash aws.sh, and then that would execute that script for us. But I'm seeing an error somewhere. Okay, all right. It's giving us an error. It's giving us an error. So where is the error coming from? All right. Okay, that's this is just crazy. So let me just do Control C to cancel out. Now the error is coming from this guy, this unzip guy. All right, because from what we saw in the last place, we saw that for anything you want to do here, you need sudo to do that, right? So I think it's coming from here. So we can put sudo here to allow the unzip to work as it should. So, but of course, we can also edit the file as well. So let's do that. Sudo nano aws.sh. All right, and then let's try to put sudo here. Okay, and then the apt-get, we didn't put sudo in front of that too. So that's, that's part of the problem. So let's put that and then let's save. All right, so let's recall and then let's run that command again. So now, so everything is working as it should. Okay, so you can see some of these tiny things. It might look small, it might look insignificant, but these are things that you need to be able to resolve when you're working with, these applications, all right, to avoid unnecessary issues. So now we have the AWS command, executing right now. So, all right, so it's been installed. So now if I do AWS version, all right, I can see that it's been installed. So great, guys, you've done so well. All right, so you've done good. So we have Jenkins server up and running. We have the EC2 instance up and running. The next thing we need to do now is to, all right, deploy from the Jenkins server to this EC2 instance, right? That's what we want to do now. But of course, we're still going to be leveraging SSM. Okay, so that's what we want to do now. Another thing that I want us to also check is the gateway endpoint that we created for the S3 bucket. Now, if I come in and I say AWS S3 LS, right, and then I press enter, now, of course, it's going to tell us access denied and all that, but then the fact that I'm saying access denied means that my instance is able to talk to S3. All right, it's able to talk to S3. The only thing is that I need an IAM role that allows this instance to be able to list buckets. All right. So if I come here to my Jenkins, let's try the same thing. S3, AWS S3 LS. Let's try the same thing. Now, we don't have the AWS installed on this one too. Wow, how did we miss that? Wow. So let's install that also. So let me just come here. Oops. Let me come right here. Let's just do cat aws.sh. All right. So let's copy all of these. I don't know how we missed that, but let's copy all of this. Come right here. Sudo nano aws.sh. All right. So let's paste it here. Okay. And then chmod is X. All right. Oops. Sorry. I keep forgetting sudo. And then now we can say bash aws.sh. So let's quickly install AWS CLI as well, right, on this particular one. And then let's run the command in the AWS S3LS, and let's see what this would give us. All right, so it's installing the AWS CLI now, and then let's wait for that to happen. So once this is done, the next thing we need to do now is to go over to the Jenkins server. All right, we'll look at a pipeline that we want to use and see how we're going to go about that. All right. But I believe that we have learned a great deal from today's video. All right. And one of the things that we're still going to do while we wait for this is to configure the GitHub webhook, because we want GitHub to be able to connect to our Jenkins server securely as well. All right. Without, with SSL, not, with HTTP. Okay. So AWS version. So let's see. So we also have that installed already. And now if I do AWS S3 LS, and let's see what this would give us. Of course, it's also denying because we do not have these action. The action we have attached to our bucket is S3 list bucket, but the action required is list all my buckets. So this tells us that our instance is able to relate with S3. The only thing that we need to configure is the policy, but we don't need this policy because, it doesn't apply to what we want to do. So there's no point. But the reason for this test is just to check that indeed we can talk to S3. So Jenkins is ready. EC2 instance is ready. Now we need to go over and perform the deployment through Jenkins. So guys, I would like to stop here. In the next video, we'll see, all right, how to go about the Jenkins deployment to the EC2 instance. All right. Thank you so much. It's been a delight talking to all of you. I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.